Climb into the cockpit with pilot and Link Square's Chief Legal Officer, Tim Perilla, as he invites legal leaders aboard to share advice that will help you navigate even the most turbulent times of in-house counsel work. We'll cover a range of topics from data privacy to legal team structure to public company transactions and beyond. You don't want to miss this series. Fasten your seatbelt and prepare for takeoff. You're listening to Cockpit Counsel.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Cockpit Counsel. My name is Tim, and as always, we have with us Alyssa Verzino, our producer. And today joining us is going to be David Sclar. David, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So we start out every episode the same way. It is an aviation themed, at least in some aspects, aviation themed show. What is your pre-flight ritual?
So I've been really looking forward to this question, Tim.
Okay.
I've heard you ask it of others, and I don't think anyone has talked about basically doing their due diligence.
Okay.
I check, the flight, right? I check if the price has changed.
Yeah.
I check if seats have opened up.
It's a good one.
And, not to mention, of course, if there's, changes or delays or whatever.
Of course.
Or one time I booked a flight from the opposite city by accident.
Okay.
So I was leaving from my destination.
Right.
But, basically by doing my homework, if I can get a good deal or get a better seat, that's well worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the other aspect of the pre-flight ritual is that no matter how much you plan for, there's always some sort of scrambling day of.
Sure.
And, I thought about that with regard to what we're going to talk about.
Sure.
Because you have to prepare, but at the same time, no amount of preparation is enough to have it be absolutely smooth sailing. There's always something to deal with in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to do your preparation, but also be confident enough to handle that when things don't go quite as planned. You're going to be all right. Yeah,
the prep helps you be ready, but the heart will always sort of have to race the day of in some capacity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about your career path. Well, where are you based?
I'm based in Los Angeles because I work fully remotely.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Are you originally from there?
No, I'm from Boston.
Okay,
cool. That's why I'm here.
All right, great. Yeah, I was going to ask you. I was like, did you fly all the way out here for this one?
Almost.
Yeah.
I had some other things to do.
Yeah, so I hear. So, well, I'm really happy that you're able to join us here live. It makes it a lot more fun, more engaging and natural conversation in many ways. So it's good.
Yeah, it's really
so,
great.
So let's talk a bit about your career path. So you're from Boston. You now live in LA. I know you've gone through the big law thing.
Yeah.
Made the transition in-house. We talk a ton about that on the show. Would love to hear in your own words about your career and what you're doing now.
Yeah, I think, with regards to, this conversation and kind of where my head's at, my focus is, I had this awesome experience where I joined a startup called Rally Health.
Nice. Really
at the inception. I was the second lawyer, but it was really, in a way, we was, just the very beginning building this thing,
right.
First product launch. And, it just had a really, the success story that you hope for, what every month was growth and, new customers, new markets, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
I had numbers in mind to share, but suffice it to say, it was great stuff.
Yeah.
And it was tremendously challenging.
Yeah.
And the biggest challenges, of course, there was time pressure, difficult, legal work to be done.
Sure.
But the biggest challenges really were kind of people challenges.
Yeah.
And kind of navigating expectations of non-lawyers for what legal could do or where we might be standing in the way.
Right.
So, that really has me thinking a lot about what it means to be in-house.
Yeah.
And what I like and don't like and what skill set I have. But before all that, I was in big law.
Yeah.
And I could talk about that if you want, but
What was your practice area?
Yeah. So, I went regulatory from the beginning.
Okay.
Some people I think don't even realize that's a path.
For a lot of people, it's not.
Yeah. It's pretty binary.
Yeah.
But I knew going into law school that I was really passionate about healthcare.
Yeah.
I almost got a PhD in healthcare policy.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
So, I looked only at firms that really excelled in healthcare, but also had big clients that would, pay the high rates.
Yeah.
And because I'm from Boston, Ropes and Gray was the perfect fit for where I started.
It's a big one. It's
Yeah.
a big one here, for sure.
So I was at Ropes, and then I left Ropes when I was a fifth year and started the healthcare regulatory group with a partner.
Okay.
I think more accurately, he started it, and I
And
tagged
brought
along.
you along? Yeah, it's nice.
But I did it at Cooley,
Yeah.
and that was how I really got into tech,
Okay.
because Cooley's clients were so early tech folks.
Yeah. Did you work with Al Brown or Charlie Cameron over there? You know those guys?
I actually don't.
Okay.
I was in the DC office.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They're Boston
Yeah.
guys.
Gosh, I don't even know if we had a Boston office when I, went over there.
Yeah.
Both Ropes and Cooley were just grew when I joined, went
Yep.
international.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I think the past 10, 15 years have been real good to law firms. So
They have been. They have been. Sometimes at the expense of, their clients. But
yeah, we'll talk about that.
yeah. A little bit of burying the lead. So, so talking a little bit, and not to go too far off script, you had mentioned that there are some things that you don't like about practicing in-house. Why don't we start there?
Yeah, I actually didn't mean necessarily that I don't like them, more that they were the things that make or break your success
Yeah,
are not what you would expect.
that's true. Yeah.
I definitely could come up with some things that I don't like. But what I would say is that, one of the really difficult things is that, people don't do necessarily what you've told them to.
Right.
Even if you've told them plain as day, this is my recommendation, this is my advice.
Right.
Or it's really important that, you do X in order to comply, or
Right.
meet this client demand. It just doesn't get done sometimes. So you have to make it really clear, and you need to follow up. And you wouldn't think that that's, your job is kind of custodial in that way,
Yeah.
but it's make or break. A big part of my theme today is avoiding escalations.
Okay.
And that's one of the ways you do that is because you just sort of think kind of like defensive driving
Sure.
about, even though their light is red, what if they ran it?
Right. Right.
How do I be ready
right.
to swerve?
Yeah, exactly. So thinking about, it's interesting because you're in the healthcare space, a little bit more emphasis is placed on the legal guidance, say, than maybe certain other spaces. Just being a regulated industry, of course. So, did you find it created more of a sense of comfort for you to be able to go in-house in that healthcare field, as opposed to maybe had you gone into, some consumer tech or something like that?
Yeah, I think it can be daunting to go in-house and add value right away. Yeah. Beyond the most obvious thing, which is, there's a contract that needs to be signed.
Right.
But if that's all you're doing, right, your in-house role is pretty limited.
Yes.
So it really helped to have an area of expertise that people were looking for, and that I was kind of the only person in the room that knew about.
Yep.
For me, it was really not just healthcare, but privacy. I navigated into HIPAA.
Yep.
So I had so many HIPAA conversations where, I did know the most, and, then could kind of direct it the way that I wanted it to.
Okay.
And show people early on that, I know a lot about this, but I'm going to make it really practical and business friendly for you.
Yep.
And kind of make my own reputation in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
And so making the transition from being at a law firm, going in-house, what were some of the unexpected difficulties you faced?
Yeah. I definitely kind of pointed out that, it's kind of, even if you tell people something, they might not do it. I even had email chains where I said, here's what you should do. And then I was accused later in the same chain of not having told them.
Right.
And then I was really...
Scroll down.
Right, exactly. But, you have to really think, carefully before you say scroll down.
Right.
Even if you're right.
Yeah.
Is it worth it to, I don't know what the opposite of saving face is, but to take away the face of the person,
Right.
right? Do you want to rub their face in it? Do you want to make them feel bad? Or is the job of the lawyer to kind of de-escalate that situation?
Yeah.
Again, that same word will come up a lot, but like, I just, I wanted to kind of shout from the rooftops, hey, I didn't mess up.
Right.
But you can't do that. You're a service provider and you're in the business of making other people look good.
That's right.
And so, I think maybe the biggest thing that I learned was that you can't have ego.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you've worked at a big fancy firm before. Nobody cares.
Yeah, exactly. It's the difference between being effective and being right, and which would you rather have, right? And if you're in-house, I think most people would rather be effective. If you could be both, that's awesome. But a lot of times, talking about how right you are is a very ineffective way to get something done.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the other thing that's coming to mind is that, there's so much information you don't have and you aren't told that's extremely relevant and salient.
Yes.
And so you have to sort of go fishing, but you have to do it in a way that's, again, kind of deferential and respectful rather than a deposition.
Right. One of the tactics that I use when I'm interviewing for attorney positions is I ask the candidate to guess my dream job. What is my dream job? And I give them parameters. Let's say I'm going to give you 2 minutes and you can ask me questions that should call for yes, no, maybe. I'm not really going to elaborate. And then I'm going to give you 5 questions that call for more for a more narrative of an answer. And I use that to get it at the point that you're making, where people oftentimes come to you with an issue and they think that's the issue. And I found that no sooner do you answer that specific issue, you get some other information that makes that answer you gave not the right answer, or not the effective answer, I guess.
Yeah.
That's the way to put it.
So, you can't be overconfident that you're right, because you may be wrong because you don't have the right facts, and that's not your fault. But if you're...
Or you may be answering the wrong question.
That's right, because you may be answering the wrong question, or... I had something more to say on that, but I think you're absolutely right.
So let's talk a little bit about good intentions and poor outcomes. You have any war stories around that?
Yeah. So, I think when I think about, war stories, I think a lot about, just day to day, every day is a potential kind of situation gone wrong. So a lot of it is just kind of good housekeeping and asking these questions like we're talking about. But sometimes there's some really high stakes stuff that's obviously so. Mm-hmm. And that's where, you really feel like legal's an easy scapegoat.
Yes.
If you lose a client, or you have a security event and it makes the news, which is salient for me because I'm in privacy.
Sure.
There's a real risk, you could lose your reputation and the company, or you could lose your job.
Right.
And so, some of the maybe I'll give you a choice kind of which direction you want to take it. But,
sure.
One of the kind of war stories I have are around clients who want to say no to a deal, and they have a legal reason for doing so.
Of course.
Oftentimes one that you don't agree with, you think they're either wrong or arguably wrong and could be persuaded.
Yep.
So that's kind of a real high stakes thing. Or another thing is where, you see a legal issue where the company could be in trouble, either urgent or not. And then you want to fix it, but you're not sure how to go about doing that. Right. So curious what you think is really interesting to you.
Let's start with the second. I think that's an interesting approach.
Mm-hmm.
I think as an in-house lawyer, you have to be comfortable with the fact that you're not going to know how to get to the right outcome all the time.
Yeah.
Right. which is relatively difficult. I've been fortunate enough to never have practiced in a firm. I've been in-house my whole career, but coming out of law school, and honestly, even like early on in my career, like thinking that you have to go and find the answer, and the answer lies in pursuing those paths that your legal education told you to pursue, right? Like go and get to the bottom of this legal issue. It's like, okay, well, maybe that might solve the legal issue, but rarely will the legal issue be the entirety of the business issue.
That's right.
So
one of my favorite kind of techniques, and I think we're just giving away, by the way, now everyone knows how to interview with you. And I'll share my best tactics. So I won't stand out in interviews now, because everyone will know what to do. But when I have a hot legal issue, so to speak, and I'm trying to get the attention of the leadership, but I don't want to step on toes, or kind of, you never want to be Chicken Little. Everyone's on fire.
Right.
What I do is I look for where the business is going to be affected by the legal issue.
Yep.
And I talk to somebody from the business with some seniority and get them hopping mad about the business side of it.
Right.
And then I sort of let them escalate and, make the legal issue part of the conversation, but not the only reason we're meeting with leadership.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really effective.
It's really challenging for attorneys who do sit at the executive level. It's really difficult to make a legitimate time carve out for a pure legal issue.
Yes.
Right. With the rest of the executive team. Like it's a very different story if it's something like, all right, we're going through some M&A activity or something, and or we're going through a venture financing, and the CEO is also the founder and needs to know that this, that, and the next thing will impact the founder's shares, right? In some way, like it becomes a legal issue that they're going to need to be aware of. But when you're talking about things that broadly impact the business, like as a C-level executive, you should already come in and be like, here's where, heads up, if the legal issue comes up, this is where it should be, and this is my view on it, and this is how we'll manage it. And there's really not much need for discussion. Sometimes there is discussion, but you should always come in with the legal stuff handled.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I think the one where I need to use the business person as a battering ram.
Yes.
Is one where I can't get the legal issue handled without some executive help.
Right.
That's hopefully a very, very rare case.
Right.
Because I agree with you. I want to give them the bottom line and the result, not the ask, wherever possible. But sometimes, you need some extra push.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you talk a lot about de-escalating or making sure that you're not escalating things unnecessarily. Tell me a little bit about that transition in-house, how you navigated what to escalate, what you should handle on your own. How do you handle things cross-functionally?
Yeah, and when I talk about escalations, and I think it's funny. I think in-house teams and companies have different words for what escalation is to them. I mean, what I'm talking about here is not kind of running something up the chain of command. That's ordinary.
Yep.
I'm talking about a situation where hair is on fire.
Yes.
You've got 20 people on an email chain, and it just won't stop.
Right.
And it's getting increasingly angry and petty.
Yes.
And going in all directions. That is a very dangerous situation.
Yeah.
And so much of our job is to keep those situations from happening.
Yeah.
And that's really hard.
Yes, it is.
Especially, by the way, I wish it were only one email chain, but it's Slacks and text messages.
Well, yeah.
And gosh knows how many other channels where, and they're not talking, people aren't talking to each other.
Yeah.
So I guess my first thought is legal should never be the source of the escalation.
Right.
Don't start the fire yourself. It's hard enough to put them out.
Yeah. Yeah. it's remarkably good advice, because there are a lot of in-house lawyers who just don't grasp that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything is an emergency. Everything's a panic. Oh my gosh, you need to know about this. It could be the future of the company. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
It's probably not the future of the company.
Right.
Like 99 times out of 100, at least.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Exactly. 99 times. It's so true.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna, I mean, perfect example is, say you're gonna contact somebody's boss and kind of go above them. That's a big deal.
That's a huge deal.
I think a lot of junior lawyers coming in-house might do that reflexively because they want to solve the problem quickly.
Yeah.
It's coming from a good place.
I think so. Yeah.
And burn a bridge.
And I think there's an element of copying in hierarchy that's learned at firms.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like, all right, make sure the partner knows this, sees this, is aware of this, make sure the partner can back me up, that sort of thing. There's an element of like, it's the whole firm. It's not you as an associate on an island.
Yes.
Right. And that's what bringing in those additional, authority figures, so to speak, can bring. So it's a natural thing for in-house people who may be working with someone who, from a leveling perspective, is their peers, as their peer, to then be like, all right, well, I'm gonna push this.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, nothing gets you hated more quickly than doing that.
It's true. It's true. And you don't want the reverse. Right?
That's right.
I kind of live in fear of that because every situation is complicated, and I don't want, I'm not the GC, but I don't want the GC hearing about it, that I mishandled something.
Yeah.
And so if somebody goes above me, I'm frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely. As well you should. I think there's, so one of our corporate values at Square is being team first.
Yeah.
Right. And I can't think of very many things that are less team first than copying someone's boss.
Yeah.
Like, quite to the contrary, like I regularly encourage my team, like, if you see someone says something that like is on an email with that person's boss, and you know that you just have to come back and change this person's perspective, do it one-on-one.
Yes.
Like, set up time with that person one-on-one and just be like, listen, I did not want to send this to your boss, but like, here, like, let's talk about this. Let's figure this out. Because that's what you do as a teammate.
Yeah.
Right. And again, it's the difference between being effective and being right. Right. You can be right in both of those situations, but way more effective if you're talking with that person directly.
That's right. And I think you earn, hopefully, if the person recognizes what you're doing,
yes,
hopefully you earn major points and trust from that individual. And it helps you stand out to them as a great partner, more so than, the quality of your legal advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. There's also a learning curve for attorneys on how to work with outside counsel when they move in-house, and I'd be interested to hear both of your strategies for working with outside counsel and making them one of your business partners. Yeah.
So I love that question because I'm so passionate about the relationship with outside counsel. It can be really problematic.
Yeah.
In ways that people don't appreciate. You'd think it's just billing. But they can kind of go off your game plan, and that can create a huge headache if they're introducing legal issues that, you didn't plan to cover, or they're doing it in ways where they're not proactively problem solving, or they're not respecting the business need or the deadline. So I want a outside counsel to be a really, really close partner. And, heck, I actually want to feel kind of like a special client to them.
Of course.
And I think we all want that. But I nurture it personally.
Yeah.
I will try and give the outside counsel as much context and background, not just about the legal issue, but about the personalities involved.
Right.
And how we got here.
That's right.
I wonder if you do the same thing and maybe more. Right.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear from people who have worked at firms to understand that perspective of how to best work with a firm. Mine has been a bit through trial and entirely through trial and error, and a lot more error than I'd like to admit. But my big thing is setting expectations, and it's just simple. It's just simple stuff. It's like, at the end of the day, you need to be able to communicate with me so that I can communicate effectively within the organization.
Yeah.
Like, I can talk with you and recognize that you have certain obligations that you need to fulfill, right? There are certain things that you may need to say in an email, right? And I get it. But there's also an aspect of, if you saying that in an email has the potential to foreclose a business opportunity, I expect you to call me. And then just put a note in the file and say, I had a phone call with Tim. Right? Something like that. Don't send me an email. Right? Like, have a little bit of awareness that, unless it's like, maybe it's different in like the healthcare industry, but everything else, largely speaking, that's not like a regulatory mandate. Like, very rarely is there a circumstance where, like, not only must the legal advice go here, the business must follow this legal advice. And if business leaders choose not to, there becomes an ethical obligation on the in-house lawyer to escalate up. Right. And it's usually something to do with straight up breaking the law. And it's not just like infringing on a patent or like, using some trade dress or something. That doesn't get there. It's like, we're going to falsify these financials ahead of our quarterly filing. And that's what we're going to do because we want to make sure that, like, that you have to escalate that, like, and that's like, lawyer should put it in email. You cannot do this. I will not represent you and do the blah, blah, blah. Right. That whole aspect. But short of something that is a clear violation of law, do not foreclose a business opportunity.
That's right. I mean, if you want to have flexibility, to, everyone talks about how in-house lawyers are supposed to be creative. You can't be creative if you're outside counsel, just tied your hands.
That's exactly right. And a lot of problems are like Rubik's cubes. Right. And like, okay, I asked that question because I needed an input, and it's going to lead to 5 more questions and 10 more questions that I just need to chase down. Right.
And by the way, there was a point earlier where we were talking about, asking questions, and I had something to say, and it just came to me. Which was that when you ask those questions, of the business, tell me more about what you're trying to do, or which client is this for? Is this a big client? All those kinds of things. Some of the time, what you're teasing out is the quality of the business idea, not just legal issues. You're almost, I think I've heard someone say you're a filter for the business idea. And, some of the time, that's invaluable. And lawyers are so hungry to provide business strategy. That is the business strategy.
Exactly. I mean, being able to ask the right questions, not to try to push what you think is the right decision, but to try to show people how you're thinking about it so that they can come to that same conclusion or not. Or not. But if they do, great. And then you're very effective and you're seen as a very good business partner. Or at least if people are still able to go down your thought process and think that the business opportunity is still the right business opportunity, maybe there's something else that you're not aware of that's going on, and you can continue to probe, or you just recognize that there's a point where you've got to trust that person knows better than you do. Right.
I mean, I'm curious if this is just, my experience, but sometimes it can be effective for workflow management and triage. Because if someone has a business question and they schedule them, they put the meeting on the calendar with very little context, and they share the business idea, and you ask a bunch of questions, and it's clear that they really don't have it formulated. You say, okay, well, come back to me with just a few bullet points just to frame the discussion. you never hear from them again.
That's true.
And then, you can kind of go on to the other things that are urgent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's fine, man. Talking about outside counsel, we could probably go on and on for hours on that, but
yeah,
that's managing the expectations with outside attorneys, I think is really, really big.
I mean, I don't know. In my view, the gold standard is when my outside counsel is saying the things that I would say in the way I would say them, whether in the conversation or in writing, as opposed to the worst case where it's a game of telephone. They send you something, I have to decipher it and distill it into something for the business and maybe get that right, maybe not.
Yeah.
Try to deliver it to the business. The business has questions. They don't make sense to the outside counsel. It's chaos.
It is. It absolutely is. And I think for in-house attorneys, like, it's important to do your due diligence before you talk to your outside attorneys. Like, you should have enough understanding as to what the business objectives are. You should have already formulated certain ideas around where you think the issue should come out, not only from a legal perspective, but from a business perspective. And you should be able to have that debate on behalf of your business with your counsel.
Yes.
That's a big thing. And I'd be interested in hearing your perspective, both as an outside attorney and as an in-house attorney. Like, for me personally, I'm not a big fan of allowing my law firms to speak directly with board members or executives. Mm-hmm. And it's not a territorial thing. Mm-hmm. It's the aspect that outside lawyers are going to not recognize when they don't fully understand what the question is.
Yeah.
Or why the question's being asked, given some of the internal dynamics. Like, you think about potential issues around around some board level power struggles or C-level power struggles, questions being asked in that way, that can become really problematic, that you don't really, like, it's not actually a legal issue, but they turn it into one.
Yeah.
When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Exactly.
And that's some of the concerns that I have, and why I make it a point to be as diligent about understanding the business purpose and going and getting what we need from our outside attorneys, and being really, like, well educated by the outside attorneys as to why the analysis goes a particular way.
That's right. Yeah, I'll sometimes give them, I'll do my homework. You're sort of handing them the baton, you're giving them a running start, they don't start cold.
Right.
And I will already feed them some of the hardest questions I anticipate from the business.
Right.
As a bit of a trial run to see where they're going to go.
Yeah, exactly. The more predictability you can get from these folks, the better.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, by the way, I'll post game too. That's the other thing. Right. Afterwards, after the call.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
What do we think? Did this go well? Who do we need to follow up on? What's the best way to do it?
Yep.
And hopefully your outside counsel's good at that thought process, as opposed to just going off and saying, well, I'm going to research this legal issue. You take care of the rest.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Well, and also it'd be great to hear a bit about your book. So you wrote a book, Workplace Strategies for Technology Lawyers. And a lot of your message is about soft skills, which you've been talking a lot about on this episode of Cockpit Counsel. So what's your take on, like, the soft skills that professionals need to be successful in-house?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, what people want is they want something. We were talking before the show about how this is a handbook. People want quick, useful, practical tips to do their job well. And I didn't see a whole heck of a lot of those for in-house lawyers when I started.
Yep.
This book's actually almost 3 years old now.
You got to do version 2.
Yeah. I mean, if I don't give it all away on this podcast, hopefully. But, they're sort of hard-fought, ideas in here, right? They don't sound that hard. Things like, point number 1 is, bring solutions, not issue spotting.
Yes.
As a concept, that's not that complicated. As a reality, it's a really hard soft skill.
Yeah.
And so, I try to give a bunch of pointers like that. I also introduce teams that you work with in the business and kind of what their agenda is. Like I talk about marketing. You can't talk about marketing without talking about a budget.
Right. That's right.
Which no one would, you don't learn that in law school or even at a firm. But it's all about efficiency, for, whether it's clicks or signups or engagement or something, where that's the numerator and the denominator is the cost
Right.
that they've spent, and they want a good ratio. And so, that's where you fit in. And so I try to introduce teams like that and the personalities involved and the challenges. So it's something that I still look at my own tips every time I'm practicing.
Nice.
And I love hearing from people who find it useful in a way that, something on litigation or contracts wouldn't help them.
Right.
So
That's awesome. And then it would also be interesting to hear how you think about framing issues, whether it's to the GC or the CEO. How do you frame it differently? And Tim, would love to hear you weigh in here too.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm curious where you stand on this from your vantage point as GC, and I think I don't know if you were GC at DraftKings, but
I was.
You were. So you've got kind of some credentials and influence behind you that I think you could call up the GC, the CEO, and I said earlier, don't start a fire. Maybe you have the authority to be the kind of lawyer who could start a fire.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, I guess maybe I'll just only do the question.
Sure.
You can ask me something. But my question is, from your vantage point, is that part of the role of an influential GC to kind of throw some weight around with the executives? Or even in your position, are you still kind of treading carefully and more of a service provider?
It's a good question. I wouldn't say that I necessarily tread carefully, but I do move forward deliberately and for a purpose, and I'm able to articulate that purpose well. If I'm going to escalate a legal issue to the CEO, different things, certain things are very obvious, right? And, in my most recent gig prior to Squares at DK, some of the issues that we had absolutely warranted Jason Robbins' time, right, and attention, and that time and attention was very generously given by Jason, which was great. And we had a really strong partnership, and we built a lot of trust through some of those challenges, not only with Jason, but the Matt and Paul and Tim Dent as well, just kind of going through some of these things. So at some point there are very obvious things that it's like, it must go, right?
Yeah.
Things that are a little bit different, a little bit more ambiguous, I think it's just important that you understand why you're taking it to the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned something earlier, don't show up with just issues, show up with solutions. And I think that if you're in any level of in-house practice, you should always have a proposed solution and come at the business from the perspective that you understand that your position may be the wrong one, because you probably don't have the same perspective that the rest of the business has. And you're going to that person to get perspective, not to get a sign off on what you think is right or wrong. Right.
Yeah.
And so, if I'm reporting into the legal leadership, the reasons for escalation are probably a little bit different than the legal leader going to the CEO. Right. It's probably a discrete legal issue that you're bringing to your general counsel or your chief legal officer. Right. It's probably not at all a legal issue that you're bringing to your CEO. unless it is something that like is maybe a sex harassment, something that like has personal impact that you just don't feel comfortable making a choice on, not because you're worried about accountability, but because it doesn't really affect you or the company in the same way that it would affect that person, that CEO as an individual, those board members as individuals, the other executives as individuals, right? So I kind of think about it a little bit like that. But no matter what you're doing, be deliberate about it. Don't go with confusion.
Yeah.
Right? Just understand why you think you need to escalate it to the CEO and why you can't make the call.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the case this is probably not the case with the CEO because their time is so limited, but I would say that when I am raising, a hard issue to business colleagues, it's kind of an accordion type of situation where I go in and I demonstrate that although I have a perspective on it, I'm prepared to go wide. I want open discussion. I'm not taking issues off the table.
Right.
But then part of my job is to then bring it home and distill what everybody came up with into now, let's call it 2 or 3 paths, A, B, and C, trade-offs, and offer the business a real clear decision that they can sink their teeth into. So it's not just a meeting to introduce chaos.
Yeah. And providing actionable outcomes to what were otherwise quagmires of issues.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, because you, as much as I want to be open-minded, I also want to help them get things done. I'm going to be held accountable for both of those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, we end every episode with some rapid-fire questions. So if you're ready, we'll dive right into those.
I am.
Awesome. So what is your hot take on working in-house?
My hot take on working in-house is that it requires empathy. That is such an essential skill. Knowing where people are coming from, even empathizing with your team, right? I hammer home that point about, issues, solutions, not recommendation. Sorry, recommendations, not issue spotting.
Right.
But from an empathy standpoint, I totally get it. A junior lawyer coming in-house.
How would they ever know?
How would they ever know?
Yeah.
It's hard enough to spot issues that, you have to really focus on that challenge, and they would want to. So I want to honor that, and then help them push further, as opposed to, basically saying, you didn't find a recommendation, you failed on the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. There's got to be an element of training and education, right? It's practicing in-house is a very distinct area, and it's a very different skill set than what you learn in law school or at firms.
Yeah.
Nice. That leads nicely into our next question, which is what is your number one tip for developing soft skills in-house?
My number one tip for developing soft skills in-house. I mean, obviously it's so cheesy, but my book is helpful. I can't lie, right? It's meant exactly for that. I don't know where else to go. Having a really good mentor is huge. A lawyer who's going to have that empathy for your learning process, and kind of give you the behind the scenes perspective on the situations that they're handling and why they're handling it a certain way. So hopefully, if you're lucky enough to be able to choose your job, you would factor in your mentor and your the person you report to very heavily.
Awesome. And then the last one, what is the best career advice that you have either given or received? So,
great question. And so we'll go back to Ropes and Gray, bring it all full circle.
Yep.
When I was at Ropes, there were some awesome partners that I saw who I was really hoping to become one day. And not just become like, I wanted to be them.
Yeah.
And one of my early reviews, the partner who did the reviews said to me, you're never going to be them. You're just not going to be the exact carbon copy of that partner. And if you try to be, it's to your detriment.
Yeah.
You have to be you. You're going to develop your own style and your own way of doing things. So, sure, take a tidbit here, a lesson there that you want to emulate, but don't curtail your learning process, and certainly don't get frustrated because you're trying to be someone you're not.
That's great advice.
So one last thing we recently have been asking folks is, are there any charitable endeavors or organizations that are near and dear to you that you want us to try to amplify or want to try to spread awareness about?
I guess I won't put like a specific name out there.
Okay.
But I think given my whole attitude around empathy and tolerance, I would look for charitable organizations that are, bringing people together and starting conversations.
Okay.
And, countering, misinformation or hate and that kind of thing. Any organization that's doing that is something we really need in our world, especially with social media and of that sort.
Yeah, exactly. Well, David, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time, and really glad that the travel ended up working out where we could do this in person. This was really great.
Yeah, my flight home is soon, so I need to go check if the seat is opened up.
Listen, check on your upgrade.
Exactly.
It's awesome. Well, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. And if you like this, give us a follow on all the socials, a like, all of that, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.